it's going to be, especially going into the summer. I don't know what it is, like, is it a psychosis summer kind of vibe where it's like, I don't know, like...
Is it a psychosis summer?
Like, instead of hot girl summer, it's like psychosis summer?
Probably, because this is giving me, again, we've talked before about how this is kind of feels deja vu-y of 2020. Mm-hmm. Because that's when a lot of people woke up, mm-hmm. and there was this sudden, like, deep diving and rabbit holing of information. The North Node was in Gemini. So that's what happened, is everybody went through, like, the awakening, like she said, like, diving into, like, the information. The problem is that a lot of people got stuck there. They never, like, moved on from that phase, and that's what actually creates psychosis. It's not, like, you can, listen, we've all gone down the rabbit hole. Mm-hmm. That's how we ended up here. But at some point, you have to move past it, which if we look at the North Node transits, it was giving us that exact rhythm. The North Node in Gemini, which was from 2020 to 2021, was the information stage. It was the disclosure stage. It was like, go down every rabbit hole you can and get all the information. But then when the North Node transitioned into Taurus, it was like, okay, how do I practically apply this information? Mm-hmm. How do I come back to, like, groundedness with this? Now the North Node is in Aries, which is like, how do I execute this? How do I now take action with what I know and what I'm aware of? And when the North Node goes into Pisces, it's like, that's where you transcend information. It's just, it's spiritual wisdom at that point. It's intuition, it's guidance, it's connection. And again, like we've been saying, the problem is that that process hasn't happened.
Right.
That...
Yeah, everyone's stuck in COVID psychosis still, and we're about to go through another layer of with all this Gemini energy, and that's really where, like, COVID was a test, because it did send, mm-hmm. especially in America, everybody into psychosis, because when people weren't able to just go to their job, do what they've always done, and everything was disrupted, it's whether people are spiritual or not, a lot of people experienced a form of psychosis that they haven't been able to come back to. Did the lockdowns obviously not help that? Right. The vaccines, yes. the spinning of misinformation. We had BLM that summer. We have Palestine this summer. Yeah. So it's all just ways to kind of just get you sucked in. And psychosis is just any, you're disconnected from what the reality is. And it's very easy for the ego to hijack it. And this is what we've said for years. I'd say it on this live streams all the time, of just how the ego knows you the best. Your biggest enemy is inside of you, and that enemy knows all of your mannerisms to a T. Your thought process, your body process, mm-hmm. your emotional process. It knows exactly how to trigger you. It knows how to spin you. It knows what thoughts to send you into a mentally unstable place, because we can see whether it's 3D land with mental illness, it's gone off the charts in the last couple decades. Or, in the spiritual community with spiritual psychosis, it's much easier to see that when spirituality is still kind of making a headway into the collective. It's very easy to be like, oh, that person thinks they're Jesus, they're spiritual psychosis, right there, whatever. But mental, like, just for an average person, we failed to see that we've been in psychosis all along. And from school to college, and with our experience coming out of college and going on mission, it's like, it's a full psychosis. Mm-hmm. You're partying, you're drinking, you're doing it all over again. Your body's taking a toll, specifically in college. You think you're invincible, and your body is just taking the hits, and it's doing damage, and we don't realize that, because I can only reflect on myself pre-mission to now, and it's like, there was psychosis there. I thought I had it all figured out. I thought that reality and doing it the right way was the right thing, and just like billions of people out there, but that is the psychosis that they have put us under since we've been in the system through indoctrination. It's constantly gone on. It's never changed.
Yeah, and nobody talks about the fact that psychosis can also present as someone who is deeply linear and logical and over analyzing, and their whole life is rigid, and their whole life has to logically make sense, and they're They're dealing with so many limitations internally. They're dealing with so many belief systems. That is also a psychosis. But the thing is that our society and like the way that things are set up now is we label people with those things who are outside of the box, right? Who are kind of expanding rapidly, and then sometimes that can look a little crazy, right?
Yeah.
It can look a little chaotic. But the thing is that chaos in and of itself is not a bad thing. But our society has now come to this place where if your life is totally structured and it's the same and it's routine and you're just serving the system every day and you're locked into all these belief systems about reality and the way things work, that's also a psychosis. And I think with this Jupiter entering Gemini era that we have, and of course we have Pluto in Aquarius, another air sign, is that I think because Gemini is duality, right? It's like the twins. It's the shadow and the light. It's all sides of the coin. And so what I'm interested to see is that, you know, as the ego starts to deeply malfunction, Hope and I have been saying, in 2025, all 3 outer planets are going to shift. That means we're having a paradigm shift, whether you believe in it or not. It's happening. Uranus is going to enter Gemini.
It's going to be rough.
Okay? Uranus is the planet of shock, evolution. It's an electric energy. When that thing enters Gemini, our whole mental body and the way we think and how we use our brain, that has to change. So I'm interested in how this is going to play out, because I think what needs to happen is also that those who are deeply in the mind see their own psychosis. Where, like you said, it's really easy to pinpoint what we think psychosis looks like, but not that internal psychosis that is often masked and not seen.
We're in a psychotic society, right?
Yes.
Nothing we've been told is true. We've been programmed through school incorrectly. The way we see the world is wrong. The way that the world functions is all incorrect and ass backwards. So we are in a psychotic society, and we've been in it since the Kabbalistic
mental asylum.
Right, it's pretty much the Earth is a mental institution, and that's the hardest thing to break out of, because even, I don't know if you mentioned it when you were talking about the different layers, but I was feeling into, like, denial's also a psychosis, when people, like, don't want to look at it, and I'm sure people that watch this happens, and we know, like, if someone gets overwhelmed with truth information, whether it's conspiracy theory, spirituality, and they don't want to hear any of it, that's also a form of psychosis, because it's easier to stay where you're comfortable, because if you start to feel into those topics, they can't handle the overwhelm.
Yeah, the cognitive dissonance that starts
of that
to happen.
being a potential truth. That's why you know, some people did break out during COVID, and people are on their spiritual journeys, and I see it all the time, whether it was last week, you know, people saying that they're waking up and it's a very tough journey with the contrast. But, you know, you have people going through that, but you also have people that refuse to break out of the layer of psychosis that they're in. And it's none of it is our fault, technically. We've all been bamboozled, but we have a role to kind of feel into these things and not shut these things down immediately. And that's just, again, always a sign of they're comfortable in that. And if they were to open that door, it would lead them into a larger form of psychosis that they are not capable of handling.
Yeah. And I feel like the key for everyone who's like gonna, and you guys are obviously gonna probably observe people in your life who are gonna go through this process. The first step is the cognitive dissonance breaks. Mm-hmm. Whatever it is, if it's a piece of information, if it's a internal revelation of sorts, if it's a experience that suddenly breaks the cognitive dissonance. At that point, what is, I feel, the natural next step is that they want to learn more. Mm-hmm. They're like, oh shit. And then all of a sudden they want to learn and absorb truth and information, and they go down that seeking route. And then at some point you have to transcend it to be not attached to any of it. Mm-hmm. And that's the hardest leap of it all, is like everything you've learned, you then have to forget it. Mm-hmm. And then you have to dive into the unknown, which is where you gain wisdom purely from experience, purely from you walking the path and learning raw, and from your own internal guidance and your own internal intuition, and kind of cutting the rest out. And that's a hard leap. But that's the leap that I feel we desperately have to take when that North Node goes into Pisces.